Hello, solo adventurists and RPG enthusiasts. This is the Solitary GM with another video on our ongoing campaign for the Ruthless Heavens Boundless Fate. This one is going to be, well, I don't know if it'll be short or not, but we'll just run through it and see what all we get to. We're going to set up our capital and do some other things to create a more immersive environment for our uh, Arctic Blowguard to adventure in, and just have a little more fun with, the setup is play kind of concept. And I've done a little bit of prep work on that, so we're just going to run through what I've come up with. Again, Ruthless Heavens Boundless Fate is a lit RPG put out by Black Oath Entertainment and is a gem of a game. And the point of my videos on this series is to highlight that, show you how to play the game and how to make it easier to play the game if you're a little stuck on how to, especially if you're going to solo it. But a lot of these techniques might work if you're going to run this game for some adventurers, which you can do either way. So that is the beauty of a lot of the Black Oath games. They work solo or as a group. And without going any further off track, we're going to just dive right in. So start off, we're going to build the capital. And if we recall building the capital in the book, there's a couple of things that the book said to do. So page 232. Take a quick look at that again. So they say we should do some basic details before we start choosing what to build, because we can build, buildings. They are detailed right here, among other, over the next couple of pages. Before we start doing any of those things or visiting our capital, there's some things that we should decide about our capital, such as what is it called, and how did that name come to be? What are the origins of our capital? Was it constructed from scratch, or in a new location, or built on top of something else, or whatever? A little description of what it might look like, and who lives there, and that's what it suggests you do. So we went ahead and did that with our capital. So let's see what we came up with. The name of our capital is Ezera, or Ezera, however you would like to say that. I think the locals call it Ezera. This name organically evolved over years. Initially, the city that was here prior to the capital, initially it was called Ez, but as the planet's inhabitants and the city inhabitants became known as Ezerians. So the capital, or the city rather, became known as Ezer, for the Ezerians. And then, as society evolved and affection grew for their city, a more motherly feel for the city eventually added the A to form the current name Ezera. So there was a city here prior to the capital being here, and this is how the city name evolved. And the capital has taken the same name as the city that was once here. As I've alluded, the origins, the current capital, the newly built one, has been built over the ruins of an old city, which the old city had this organically generated name. Now, the capital has taken the name that belonged to the old city for the name of the new capital. There are some surviving elders that do recall some of the stories of the city, and between their guidance and a vote among the people, it was felt that this was the best place to build our new capital. It does have some interesting appearances, though, we will discuss. The capital is filled with green spaces and wooded areas, soaring trees, and plentiful flowers providing color. The buildings are all constructed from light gray bricks, mostly from the vast reserves of ash-infused clay deposits that formed when the volcanoes exploded during the transition to the Ruthless Heavens. There are red accent bricks on some of the buildings, mainly the more important buildings, I would say. They do have a few red accent bricks. The red accent bricks are a little harder to, a little more rare, so they are used sparingly. The streets are paved with a mix of clay and gravel, which is compressed into a mostly hard surface. And we say mostly hard surface because if it does get a lot of rain, then it will get a little soft. But other than that, it's pretty solid. Who lives there? Mostly refugees that survived the change. There has been a growing number of refugees from the planet, other planets arriving. It does seem our capital is more favorable than from where they came from. Things are a little in flux as far as factions go. So far, there is not anything that we desire, that they desire, that we apparently have on our planet at this time. At least that has been discovered. So there has really been little contact from the factions thus far. So that all said, that is our capital, Azera. We will be visiting that sometime in the near future, no doubt. Next up, we have the wrong page up. We have this page. Next up, we're going to set up our Starlight Inn. So as you recall, our trusty Ascendant Asterek Blogard is recuperating in the inn from his injuries from the furnace and the fight and everything with the miner. We are picking up our story on the track we were originally on, where he failed to defeat the miner and required a week of rest to recover from his injuries. So that is where we're at. So seeing how we're there, we're going to take a moment to set up the Starlight Inn to give it a little bit of atmosphere and to give us some things to interact with, perhaps. So first things first, we're going to have a menu. We're going to set up some what the evening entertainment might look like, and then we are going to generate some guests that we might interact with. And I'm just going to go through some of these things. Some of these things are done. Some of these things are not done. And we will do some of these when we pick up with the actual adventure in the next video. But let's start with the menu. That's the first thing on the list. So we have the Starlight menu right here. So we looked through the book. There's some of the creatures that you can harvest things from. And so we took some liberties with some of those things and created a menu from them with a few little additions. So for our appetizers, we have a brain pudding. It's kind of a specialty at the Starlight Inn. We also have psychic tendrils seasoned with spicy flower buds. Think of those kind of like French fries, but spiced a bit. But they're psychic tendrils as opposed to potato-based. Main dishes, we have ribs baked in a crystallized pollen sauce, garnished with ground bone marrow and a side of void jelly. And that is really tasty. So that, I highly recommend that one. Next up, we have the thigh roast seasoned with luminous moss and roasted heart pieces. May not sound too appetizing, but they once they are roasted, they are quite tasty. We season them up a little bit. The locals really love these. If you're a vegetarian, we do have an option for you as well. We have vine woven gourd and entwined vine tendril salad. So your protein does come from the gourd, but is not super tasty. So we've added this. We add some spicing to it, and when you mix it up with this vine tendril salad, that kind of covers the lack of taste in the gourd. And altogether, it is quite yummy. So if you're a vegetarian, there's your option for that. Either one of these are also good, the brain pudding or the psychic tendrils, because these are, well, it depends on how strict you are, I guess, with your vegetarianese. Those may not work. But anyway, we do have a few desserts. Sweetened nightmare tendrils dipped in honey, and flesh biscuits sprinkled with cinnamon and powdered sugar. So a couple of sweet things to add to your dinner or lunch or whatever it may be. We have a few drink specials. So if you're on the Soloist Guild's Discord, I did post these as a little teaser. And I do have a few requests for a couple of teas. So if you're one of those, feel free to stop into the Starlight Inn, and there will be a Blooming Petals tea complimentary for you. So I think there's a few that requested that, so that is for you. But other than that, we do have Abyssal Spiced Rum, Pollen Infused Water, again the Blooming Petals tea, and part of the specialty of the Starlight Inn, the Brain Pudding. They do ferment that, and they create a mind control cocktail, which is the fermented brain pudding. So you can't get these things anywhere else in the universe. This is delicates, this a special thing just at the Starlight Inn. It's kind of their thing. So that is the menu there. If you want to get something to eat, that is what we will be partaking. Next up, we have evening entertainment. So the evening entertainment, we can roll a D4 at the start of the week if we're there for multiple weeks, or whatever. Or if it's been a few weeks since we've been there, we can, whenever we enter the inn, would be a good time to roll on this as well. So there's 4 options. That's why there's a D4. We could have some live music, just a solo act. There could be live music with a band. There could be someone doing a comedy routine. And we also have storytelling or poetry, usually with a piano interlude, just to add a little atmosphere to the story or the poem as it's being read. Starla, who is the proprietor of the Starlight Inn, will often, be involved in some of these acts. She does have some poetry she's written. She does play the piano, so she's often the player for the piano interlude. Not real big on the comedy. She usually brings someone in for that one. Local artists. There's a couple in Eros that are pretty good at comedy. There are a few bands that are operating in the area. Sometimes there's a band that comes in from another planet, and she'll just bring them in and give them a chance. She does like to find new talent and promote new acts, so that is where the bands come in. But there are a few locals bands in the Eros area that are frequenting here as well. And then there is a solo act. Starla does perform some of the solo acts. There are some other local artists that have a solo act, so think singer-songwriter or something of that nature. But that is that. So at the start of a week, we would roll a D4 and determine our entertainment. Next, we have some guests that we may interact with. So I have a little table here of guests that might interact with. So there's a little D6 we would roll for this one. And you may get an ascendant, a Eros citizen, a known PC. I think that is the interesting PCs in Eros in the book table. We may have a patron, or a faction member, or a Eros official. So you would, we'll just dive into the mechanic and then we'll see how we use that table. So our mechanic for determining which guests we may interact with is kind of like this. So there's a number of guests that we may have an interaction with. Obviously, there's a lot of other guests here. We won't necessarily interact with all of them. That are there. We may not even interact with all of these that we generate. So it's just a way to kind of abstractly determine who we might run into and have a conversation with as we're sitting, eating, or passing through the main entry, the main area of the inn. But obviously there's 20, 30, 40, there's a lot of other people here that we don't even meet eyes with. So just kind of visualize, a bustling kind of inn with a lot of different characters in there. And then there's a couple of them that we might bump into or have a conversation with. And that is what this mechanic does. So the number of guests that we may have interacted with, there's a max of 16 and a minimum of 6. Those numbers seem to work pretty good. As we get through this, you'll see why. To initialize, or if it's been more than a week since we returned to the inn, then you will need to roll a d10 plus 6 to see how many guests there are. If you are returning within the week, like you initialized it, you showed up on a Wednesday, you went and initialized for the week, the number of guests there are, and then you left and you come back on Friday, then you would use this option down here. So on step 3, because you returned within a week, you would roll a d6 to see how many of these initial number of guests you found, how many of them have left, and then another d6 to see how many new ones arrive. So there's going to be a little change out of which guests are even there. So some, perhaps their stay ended and they went back home, and some new ones arrived. So that's kind of what that is. If it's been like 2 weeks since you've been there, then just reinitialize the whole thing, start over. Because after 2 weeks, probably, I mean, there might be some locals that are pretty frequently there, but we don't really account for that in this mechanic. But if you want to tweak it, you can to account for that. But we just reinitialized the whole thing and come up with some new things. If you, when you do this mechanic though, if you rolled here and you only got 7, you rolled a 6 to see how many leave, you got a 6, you got 1 left, you roll a 6 to see how many add. Oh, we did that backwards. So we only add 1, so we're up to 2, or we're up to 8, and then we roll a 6 and we roll a 6 and we move 6, we have 2 left. So 2 is not a good number. You should just bump that up to the minimum of 6 if you ever get less than 6. Likewise, if you get more than 16, then just reduce your number until you get to 16 on this step 3. Because sometimes when you add, remove, it messes it up a little bit. The next step that you would do once you determine how many guests you're going to interact with is to determine the type of each guest. And that's where you would roll on this table up here. So if you find you have 11 guests, you would roll 11 times on this table and find out who each of these people are. And that's all you really need to know about them at this stage. You don't need to detail anything else out right here at this step. So don't worry about that. Just make a little honest, in your notebook or in a scratch piece of paper or wherever you want. Just 1 through 11, roll 11 times, write down which one of these you get. That's all you gotta do. And then once you've done that, you need to determine the chance of interaction. And there are modifiers that are encouraged and arbitrary, and that means you set your own modifiers. If you think the chance of interaction is better or worse in this particular case, you can add a modifier to your roll. And we're just going to roll a d10 to determine our chance of interaction. So we roll our d10. Here's our little chart right here. Woo! Yes. So if you get less than 1, then there's a negative 10% chance of a interaction, which means no interaction. If you get a 1 or a 2 after your modifier, then there's a 0% chance of interaction. 3 to 5, there is a 10% chance of interaction. So as you can see on a d10, 1 to 5, you have very little chance of interacting. That's why we might need 16. But even at 10%, you may actually interact with them. So if you look at it that way, there is a 7 out of 10 chances of interacting. So it works out. It actually works out pretty well in my tests so far. If you get a 6 or a 7, there's a 25% chance of interacting. If you get an 8, there's a 50% chance. If you get a 9, there's a 75% chance. If you get a 10 or more with your modifiers, then it's a guaranteed interaction, 100%. Once you've determined this percentage right here, so as a example, let's say we have a patron as one of our things, and we're going to roll our chance of interaction. So we just roll the d10, sorry. We get a 7, so that means we have a 25% chance of interacting with our patron. So then the next thing we do is we roll to see if the interaction occurs. And we just roll percentage. So I said 25% chance. Here we go. We are not interacting with the patron because we got a 69. Okay, easy enough. We just move on to the next one. What you want to do is roll under or equal. So 33, that's getting closer. But if we rolled a 20, or that's a 2, if we rolled a 22, then that would mean we are interacting with that patron. And because we're interacting with that patron, we should now detail them out a little bit more so we know who they are and what their motivation is and why they're talking to us, right? So you can use some tables in the book for that. You can use your own intuition or however you want to handle that interaction. But it is going to happen for sure. And by interaction, that doesn't always mean they have to talk to them, right? An interaction could be just you bumped into them, excuse me, sorry, and that's all there is. That is the interaction. It could be more involved, like you sit down and have a lengthy conversation with them. So anywhere in between, it's up to you on that. And there's maybe some randomization you can determine how meaningful the interaction is, but that's that. If you do need to detail these ones out, let me show you real quick how I do that. So if we get a faction member, I have this D8 table as well as a D10 table for that. Here is the 8 factions that the book has in it. We just went with those 8. And then we add this additional level. So if you get someone from the engineers, hopefully not, but if you do, then you would roll a d10 to see, is it the leader? Is it a top level official? Is it just a mid-level guy? Or is it an entry-level individual? And that would tell you who it is that is interacting with you. If you get an Eros citizen, we have a little D24 table here. I do have a D24 right here. If you don't have a D24, that's okay if you want to use this table, because you can also use a D12, here's a D12, and a D6. And you could say this table, if you get a 1, 2, 3 on the D6, or a 4 to 6 on the D6, it would be these 12 over here. So if we just roll these at the same time, second table, first entry, that would be made. Or if you have a D24, you just roll it and you get a 2 actor. So easy to use that table either way. And last we have on these tables, if you got a patron, I do have a little D4 table here for a patron. Now, some of these require you to go to another table once you determine who the patron is. So if you get a faction member, you'd have to determine who the faction member is. But in this case, they are acting as a patron. So they are looking to hire you for something, perhaps, as opposed to maybe just give you information or whatever you think that might work out to be. An Eros official, which is someone who is on this as well. I probably should create a little table of Eros officials just to further define that. Maybe I'll add that in. Could be a wealthy merchant. There is a large marketplace in Eros, so there could be a wealthy merchant that requires you to obtain something for them to put into their shop, or to catch a thief that is causing problems at their shop, or there's a couple of options why a wealthy merchant might want to hire you. Maybe their uncle is missing and they need to be found, or whoever, or someone has purchased something and they need it delivered to some other planet and they need someone to take it there. I mean, there's a wealth of options there on a wealthy merchant. Or a scrap dealer. Could be a patron. So he might be needing a buyer, or he might be needing some special item, or whatever you think. That's the patron table. And that is that. And I think that is it for my environment setup at this point. So that gives us kind of a little fun place in the inn, so we can get some food. We can interact with some people, listen to the music, and have some fun there. If we go back to our capital, we now have an idea of what our capital looks like and the name of it, and we have a bit of a story coming in for our capital as well. So if you take a little bit of time, if you desire, maybe you don't like all this setup, but if you do take a little bit of time to build in some things like this, it will, in a lot of cases, make the game more fun for you as a solo adventurer, because it does give you a little more of an immersive environment to imagine and play in. So that is my video for today. That's all I wanted to cover. My next one, we will actually dive in and now interact with our environment that we have created, find out what kind of adventure or story loops we might get into, and so that that will be a lot of fun. But as for now, that is all we have. Thank you for your time and all the subscriptions and comments. If you have any thoughts on what I've presented here, leave me a comment, and till next time. Thank you for watching, and see ya.